Was this a conspiracy to have one of the girls eliminate the other?
I obviously didn't like her, but for, a stupid girl reason, but I didn't like her. We were terrible bitches to each other, but she was still my friend.
Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every single upload. You already know. Yes, you already know that I love and I appreciate you so much. All right, let's get started. Today is another case that is brought to us by Susie, a Susie special presentation, if you will. This case is actually very near and dear to Susie's heart because she knew Stacy, the victim that we are going to be talking about today. And I'm very touched just by, the trust that she has in me to cover it for all of you. Now, Susie made a reference to the people that are involved and how things kind of like played out like Mean Girls, but not like just like the worst possible outcome that could have ever happened. And I agree. Unfortunately, the, murdering Regina George in this case didn't get hit by a bus and end up like in a body brace to like avoid taking somebody's life, and then even was able to evade responsibility for almost 20 years. So we'll get into all of that. Before we do though, I have a quick message for you. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Cure. My goals, I think for the past 2 years have been getting comfortable in like just my literal skin. And I like to only wear makeup on days that I film videos. And apart from that, I've been working hard on just like pampering my skin and being able to feel comfortable barefaced. Recently, I've been trying a little something extra in my routine that has me feeling like I just walked out of a clinic, but I'm in my bathroom in my pajamas. Let me introduce you to the Cure Micro Infusion System. It is an at-home treatment that delivers science-backed serums through this little device with sterilized single-use 24-karat gold-plated 0.5 millimeter needles. It's very fancy, I know. But more importantly, the heads are EO sterilized, so you are getting a fresh, safe experience every single time you use it. I absolutely love the way my skin looks and feels after I perform the treatment. It looks more alive, smoother to the touch, and when I put on my makeup, I do feel like it sits better. That being said, this is not a miracle wand, okay? It's not promising glass skin or turning back time, but if you are looking for something to enhance your skincare routine and give you that kind of post-facial pampering kind of feel, this is such a solid option. It gives results that are similar to what you get from in-clinic microneedling treatments, but in a way that is very gentle and safe to use at home. Microneedling is known for stimulating the skin and increasing serum absorption, and Cure's system combines that concept with a really sleek design and target science-backed serums. I love the way they feel. The consistency is so hard to explain. It's light but also moisturizing, if that makes sense. Just make sure you are following the instructions properly. Don't be like me who, that TikTok where it's like, okay, find the cord. And then they pull it out and it's like, do not pull it out. If you pulled it out, don't put it back in and then you're panicked. Yeah. So read the instructions before you apply the serum and do the treatment. When it is used correctly, this can be a very safe and effective treatment. I would call it virtually painless, not painless. I was very nervous at first. I call myself like a very sensitive baby, but I know that I have a high pain threshold. So much of it is mental, but I was really needing to just like psych myself out. But I would say that it feels like just like tiny prickles, like tickle prickles, if you will. And I love that there was minimal to no downtime. I do it right before bed. So I know that like I'm not going to need to be anywhere where I require makeup. And I do it where I also know that the next day I'm not going to require makeup and I'm fresh faced, because you want to make sure that anything that you're like putting on your skin at that point, or what your skin is exposed to rather after doing the treatment, is just like nice and not heavy. You don't want to be putting makeup in, everything that you've just applied your serums to. If you've been curious about leveling up your skincare game, I totally recommend checking out Cure. Grab the 6-month supply at 70% off now, only for the first 50 customers by the end of the month by clicking the link in my description. So if you are seeing this video after September 2025, use code Sherrilyn10 for 10% off. Thank you so much. Again, Cure store for sponsoring today's video and for making me feel like a little pampered skin queen, all from the comfort of my own home. All right, let's get started. So in keeping with the Mean Girls Association, Stacy DeGrandchamp would be Caddy. All right, Caddy Heron, minus the teetering into like the villain era. Stacy Maria DeGrandchamp was a kind, intelligent, charismatic, confident, beautiful, athletic young woman about to start her senior year at Wayne High School when her life was stolen from her. She was born on October 29th, 1984 and grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She was the only child to her single mother, Rita, and the two had a very close, special bond, made their way through the world as this fierce, unstoppable duo with a lot of love and support from their very large family. For example, Stacy had 27 cousins. So even though it was, her and Rita, at home, they had a really large family, shared a very meaningful connection with all of their family members. And Stacy and her mom were particularly close to Rita's twin sister and her daughter, Jamie. Jamie and Stacy grew up one block away from each other and felt like not so much cousins, but like sisters. Like I said, Susie knew Stacy and says that she personally has two distinct memories of her, and her sharing that touched me so much, and I think allows us to understand the person Stacy was and how she was brought up. So Susie said that around 4th or 5th grade, it was like the mid-90s, Susie had gone over to Stacy's trailer and went to hang out, and she saw a Chester cheetah poster in Stacy's room and commented on how cool she thought it was. And Stacy immediately rolls up this poster and gives it to Susie. And she says she had that poster for years. And the second, memory that really sits with her is seeing her in her casket at her showing and saying that this was the first time that she had ever known someone, like her age passing away, and is a very surreal moment. And when she walked in, as soon as Stacy's mom, Rita, saw her and her friend, she recognized them despite being 6 years since they had seen each other. And Rita was just so grateful for them showing up. And Susie was expressing her gratitude and appreciation was the smallest thing that she could have done. And all I could think about is how true it is that people will always remember how you make them feel. And a memory like that, even with just the poster of being what I mean? In the mid-90s, 4th or 5th grade, just wrapping up this poster where things didn't feel as accessible to be I'll just get another one. I don't know, that just touched me just hearing that story. In her preteen years, Stacy attended St. Vincent de Paul Catholic School until she moved to the south side of town and attended Kikanoga Middle School. I literally had Susie give me voice notes of how to pronounce some of these places. I hope I got that right. And then she went on to start her freshman year at Wayne High School in 1999. So she was set to begin her senior year in August 2002. And Stacy's, I guess, high school era, if you will, I kind of just see her a catty Heron, but in all of the good ways. She had this all-American girl stereotype in the best ways. Susie said she was a member of the volleyball team. She was popular, preppy. She had good grades, and she had ambitions to attend Ball State University after graduation to study computer technology, and she had also even already applied to that. And I look at Stacy starting her senior year as one of those turning points in life where big changes were happening all around, and they were going to lead her to this beautiful, successful future. And one of those things was ending a relationship that was not serving her well. Towards the end of her junior year, she met and began dating a 20-year-old named Brandon Muff. And as somebody who dated an older guy around the same time, as well as Susie, this was very relatable. We also had our friends that did the same. And in that moment, it's you've got this excitement about, oh, it's the older guy, and you feel special with them being attracted to you, especially for girls at that time in our life. It's we so badly are chasing that adulthood and not wanting to be in this adolescent phase anymore. And then looking back is when you kind of take all of that for what it is, rarely does that ever end up well. And then you look back and you're just okay, well, I wish I could go back and change the situation, and not so much for us in that situation, but even to call out these guys and have more of an understanding of how this isn't okay, and just be get a life, leave me alone. I'm only going to be this age once, and you're a creep. So they dated through the end of spring and into the summer, but the relationship ended as Stacy was like starting to come to that realization at the start of her senior year and just realizing, okay, well, yeah, this guy is not all it. I think like if I stick with him, he's going to do nothing but hold me back. So she broke up with him, was looking forward to her future, and just was very ambitious about what that looked like. Susie makes a note that she genuinely appreciated how Bose covered Stacy's case. If you're not following Bose vs. the World, go check her out. Love, love, love her content. And Susie just pointed out that she really appreciated a part where Bose really shows appreciation for the effort Rita would put into raising Stacy just to be this wonderful young woman that she became.
Stacy had some soul to her because she grew up with a single parent mom. She didn't come from this perfect family where she had, an older brother that was 2 years older than her and both of her parents had been together for 30 years. No, back home, it was just she and her mom. And she was really kind of navigating the world, trying to understand men because she didn't have much of a father figure in her life. And her mom was rocking it. She was doing her best, And if you grew up in a single parent home with a mom, it can be complicated because mom has to put on this face of almost masculinity. She's got to be strong to keep the household together, right? While also being a woman that's trying to feel her emotions. So it's very interesting to me that Stacy was this all-American popular girl that we imagine in movies, but she had a home life that was similar to a lot of us.
So something important to know is that Stacy wasn't the only teen that Brandon had pursued. A girl named Holly, and her last name, I think it's Boisvert. My French, though, when I see it, I'm like, Boisvert. That's where I want to say it. Anyways, Boisvert. So if you're in Fort Wayne, I'm sure I'm butchering that. I apologize. Holly had also dated Brandon when she was only 15 years old. In 2002, Holly was in her sophomore year. She was also at Wayne High School, although her and Stacy hung out with different friends. And Holly is described as somebody who definitely made it a point to become like the queen bee, so the Regina George. And if her crew was the Plastics, then Amanda Richards and Whitney McGee were Karen and Gretchen. Whitney, I think, is giving more like Gretchen Wieners, like insecure and willing to do just like almost anything to stay, close to Holly. And then Amanda, more Karen, like doesn't really care much about the drama, but's along for the ride. Now, according to the former assistant principal, Elton Powers, who did an interview with the Herald Republican in 2020, he remembered Holly and he recalled her as arrogant. Others have described her as aggressive, troublesome, a bully, a mean girl. And I feel like if you're assistant principal, is the one like saying this after all these years, like that it's pretty well known that you're arrogant. It just like it says a lot about you. Bose apparently put it like people knew exactly the person Holly was and not in a compliment way. Not only did Stacy and Holly date the same guy, go to the same school, but there also was a negative kind of encounter that I believe probably would have like led to like some lingering friction in middle school that definitely left a sour taste in Stacy's mouth about Holly. So allegedly the two were at a pool party. I think it's unclear if this took place at Holly's house or at a mutual friend's. According to like former friends, Holly's place was known as being like kind of like a free-for-all. There wasn't like a lot of limitations or rules, and she was just kind of like allowed to do whatever she wants. So I'm not sure if that's where they were that day. But according to friends, Stacy was just like simply hanging out by this pool with her feet in the water, and Holly just comes up to her and says, "You're prancing around like a little effing princess." And everybody heard this, and being immature teens, they laugh, and Stacy ended up leaving the party early. She was clearly hurt and embarrassed. So after that incident, Stacy didn't want much to do with her, and they both kind of from there just like went their separate ways. It was like, all right, again, remembering how people made you feel, not cool. Like she's like, I don't really want anything to do with her. By high school, I don't think it was like something that either of them really talked about, but again, you're remembering how people made you feel. And from my understanding, there were certain times where they had like mutual friends where they were kind of like, brought into like the same space as one another and were able to be cordial, but they weren't like running up being like, "Oh my God, like I love you, good to see you." That being said, they did find themselves like hanging out more with one another when Stacy and Brandon started dating. Like I said, Holly had previously dated Brandon, and even though they had broken up, I get the impression that Holly seemed to believe that they would like get back together and hung around him with her friends. So Whitney McGee, Amanda Richards, as well as a girl named Abby Oswald, and then Brandon's roommate, Justin Troop. So Stacy was kind of like brought still into that crew that was like lingering around. Instead of like being around each other more and then kind of, veering into a more friendly side, it sounds like Holly's animosity towards Stacy just began to fester and grow. And clearly, like, if you're even looking back at that incident at the pool where it's like she just kind of like comes around as like everybody says you're prancing around like a princess, it's like, are they, or is it like just you and you're jealous because, like Stacy's clearly beautiful and lovable and all of these things, right? So it was kind of like growing into this like jealousy, hatred, but it sounds like instead of it outwardly expressing itself like to Stacy, like where Holly would like make those similar comments like she did at the pool to Stacy, she kind of like played the puppet master behind the scenes, causing friction with Stacy and the rest of the group. So it was like, I'm gonna like plant seeds like with everybody else, and I'm not really gonna say stir anything up between her and I, but I'm gonna put everybody against her. One of those incidents led to Whitney and Stacy having a misunderstanding during the summer of 2002, and Whitney was very angry with Stacy after she had heard from Holly that Stacy had told Whitney's ex-boyfriend, I think that she was like still interested in him. It's like, it sounds like a very like cliche high school scenario where it was just like, oh, like she talked to him, she said this, and it's like, why would you tell him that? It was kind of like one of those things. Susie says she's really never like been able to like verify exactly what was said about this ex, but like just hearing it very much gave, again, the mean girl vibes of like kind of like the, like the phone calls like between everybody and like when the burn book got exposed.
Oh my God, I'm not mad at her. I'm worried about her. She's not pretty. I mean, that sounds bad, but whatever.
If someone says something bad about you, you'd want me to tell you, right? Regina says everyone hates you because you're such a She said that? I can't go out. I'm sick.
Do not trust her.
Stacy's cousin Jamie was interviewed for an episode that the show Mean Girls Murder, which is crazy because there is a show called that as well, and like obviously like that reference, but Mean Girls Murder did on Stacy's case, and she said the best way to like describe it is like Holly was putting these imaginary daggers in Stacy's back and just like fanning the flames, especially like with Whitney. Like once she was mad, it was just like this anger that was like festering like towards this like mutual enemy, and then they kind of like formed even a tighter bond, Holly and Whitney did, like against Stacy. Looking back on those situations, I mean, we see this so much, and sadly it's like we have all of these examples of, what to talk to our kids about, or like even people who are watching have like younger siblings or gone through it themselves, and you want to like express like it's not the end of the world. Like these spats and these incidents in high schools, I feel so heavy at the time, especially when you've got like all your hormones and crushes and sensitivities, fighting with your friends going on. It feels like it's only happening to you and that it's not normal, but it is normal, and it shouldn't be normal, but you're not alone. And it's like we need to learn from these situations and have these conversations of being able to like call this kind of thing out, where it's like just like go to the source, like in this situation for behind the scenes, like for Holly to be like flaming this, big issue between Whitney and Stacy, we got to normalize like, Whitney, why don't you just go talk to Stacy, or vice versa, and get that out of the air. And once that communication is there, mostly it's just solved by itself. We gotta normalize just having respectful communication at any age. Once we stop talking, letting other people talk for us, that's when shit just goes sideways. So this case specifically like just kind of reminded me of that, and kind of the conversations that I have even with my oldest daughter, and that we've had like when she was in junior high and high school, and even now, like easiest thing to do is just talk about it. Easier said than done, I know, like as a grown-ass woman, still working on that. It sounds like Stacy, though, was able to recognize, there's tensions within the group. This is not a good situation. And a lot of that also probably had to do even with her relationship with Brandon. So towards the end of that summer, she stopped hanging out with them and broke up with Brandon. That being said, I believe she still stayed in contact with one of the friends that was still in that group, and that was Abby Oswald. We have tried locating more information on Abby, but there's not really a lot up there. The best that we can kind of determine is that she likely graduated with Brandon in 2000 from Wayne High School, or maybe even another school close by, and by all accounts seemed to really enjoy Stacy's company. So from what we know, on Thursday, August 15th, 2002, Stacy's mind was completely focused just on her upcoming senior year. School was about to start the following Monday, so Stacy and Abby decided they were going to go to the mall and shop for a new outfit for Stacy's senior pictures. At this time, with everything going on with the breakup and the friendships and all of that, there were rumors that were swirling that Brandon was wanting to get back with Stacy, and he was hoping to, achieve that before school started. It was limited times of having more access to her during the summer. So while Stacy and Abby were hanging out, Abby brought up that Brandon had asked for the two of them to come by his place, lived in a house on Guthrie Street, and he was going to have a house party later that night. And initially, I guess Stacy was not interested in going. She even said I really don't want to deal with Holly or Whitney or Amanda. But according to people who knew her, allegedly Abby just wasn't somebody who accepted no as an answer and was it's gonna be fine, no, let's go. Maybe she was trying to do a solid for her friend Brandon and just be yeah, okay, I'll try to get her at this party so you guys can talk. So she says to Stacy, as far as she knows, those girls aren't invited. They, go back and forth for a little bit, and then allegedly Stacy said something to the effect of, sure, why not? Okay, it's just a party. That's happening there. Elsewhere, in Fort Wayne, Holly, Whitney, and Amanda are also making plans for that evening. And Holly did hear about Brandon's party and wanted to go. However, according to Whitney on the Mean Girls murder, she and Amanda did not want to go. So they were no, we know that our parents are not down with us hanging out with these older people, showing up at this house party on Guthrie Street, and didn't want to deal with that, and also had plans with other friends that day. So that's what they were trying to get her to do. Whether there was a point in time where Holly was okay, yeah, you're right, we don't need to go there, or not, I'm not sure. Whitney says that there was a moment where Brandon had called Holly earlier in the day and said, if you do not come to this party, I'll never speak to you again. And with her still being obsessed with this older guy, she took it seriously and decided that if her friends weren't going to go, she still was going to go. So she wanted them to drop her off. So the plan was for Whitney and Amanda to drop Holly off at Brandon's house on their way to hang out with their other friends. She was going to page them when she was ready to be picked up, and if they didn't hear from her by the time they were leaving, they were just going to swing by and pick her up on their way home, which they were kind of aiming for 11:30 p.m. I think around 10:30, Whitney drops Holly off at the house, and before getting out of the car, Holly asks Amanda for her knife back, which I guess she had previously asked her to hold on to. And those who knew Holly knew that she carried a pocket knife with her, wherever she went for protection. And so Amanda said she didn't really think much of it and just gave her this knife before Holly left the vehicle. Stacy and Abby also pull up the house, I think a little bit, it was after, so it would have been around 10:30-ish. And Stacy sees Holly and Brandon sitting on the front step. And so she's walking up to the house, and allegedly she says, what is she doing here? Fair, she's told she's not going to be there, doesn't want to deal with it, and she's great, okay, here we go. According to people who knew Stacy, she wasn't the kind of person to get into a physical fight, so it wasn't perceived as let's freaking go. She also was strong enough to know if she needed to stand up for herself, she wasn't going to back down. I think in one of the interviews that Whitney did, she said she didn't think that Stacy even cared enough to fight Holly, but if Holly was going to come at her to try to fight her, then she wasn't going to, back down. She would stand her ground. So after this comment, it leads into this shouting match that quickly escalated into a physical altercation. It got very nasty. The girls were, pulling each other's hair, hitting each other, throwing each other to the ground, wrestling on the ground. It got very out of hand. According to witnesses, both of the girls, even had moments where they one would gain the upper hand, dragging each other down the street towards the backyard and driveway area even. During this fight, both Abby and Justin Troop, who was Brandon's roommate, apparently tried to break it up. However, they later said to police that Brandon wasn't interested in them stopping it and was kind of, I don't know, probably just having that moment of these two girls are fighting over me, and told them let them fight it out. So it keeps going until it is Brandon that finally decides that, all right, they're done, and grabs Stacy by the ankle and pulls her off of Holly. According to Abby, she told Stacy, okay, let's get out of here. They started walking towards Abby's car, but Stacy only made it a couple of steps before she collapsed to the ground. And when Abby looks back and realizes she's no longer following her, she runs over to Stacy and sees blood soaking through her shirt. So she screams for Brandon, who rushes over, lifts Stacy's shirt, and sees where the blood is coming from. He notices there's 2 stab wounds. There's one on her stomach and one on her upper chest area. I believe it was not a good situation. He ended up rolling her onto her side because she was, choking and eventually vomited. And according to court documents, 911 was called shortly after 11 p.m. So this was all, according to the timelines, was happening pretty fast. And when authorities arrived on the scene, they found Stacy lying in the driveway still bleeding. Stacy was rushed to the hospital, and from my understanding, I believe it was Brandon that notified her mom, Rita, that she was going to the hospital, and that Rita rushed to the hospital and was, met with the worst possible news any parent could hear, that she had lost her only child. An autopsy later revealed that Stacy had been stabbed twice with a knife. It was a single-edged, sharp blade specifically. With this being a party, and I think, multiple witnesses seeing the fight break out, there was really no denying it. So investigators had interviewed a lot of witnesses, including Holly and Brandon, and Holly admitted she and Stacy obviously had been fighting, but she said she had no idea what caused Stacy's injuries. And it sounds like a lot of people felt that way. They were we just saw them fighting and tussling and stuff, but when you're kind of reliving how this was all going from an outside perspective, it was kind of fists being thrown, people being thrown onto the ground. They were also moving away from where their verbal altercation had initially started. So I think that would also make things really hard to gauge and figure out exactly what was going on. It sounded just completely frantic. So when Holly's confronted about what appeared to be stab wound injuries, you're the one fighting with her, how did this happen? And she's I don't know. Her idea that she fed to authorities was, well, maybe she landed on something during their fight. They had knocked over this recycle bin, and she was maybe she fell on some of the glass or on an open can. And they asked do you have any sharp objects on you? And she's no. She says that she did not have a knife on her, didn't know what happened, and at that moment in time, no knife had been recovered from the scene or from any of the other witnesses that had been questioned. Because they had no evidence to go on this suspicion, and really, I guess, did not know what specifically caused it, and have that the smoking gun, if you will, they weren't able to make arrest at that time. That being said, there were a lot of rumors that were going on. She was just about to start school. So school did start. Her funeral was held on Tuesday, August 20th, 2002, which was the day after she was supposed to start her senior year. What I found so heartbreaking was she was actually buried in the outfit that she had just picked out for her senior photos. And that kind of stuff just really puts things into perspective and is just shattering. She had her whole life ahead of her. So when school starts up, there's the rumors that are going around that, all right, obviously Holly did this and there's more to this story. The main question I think was this planned? What came from just her sitting on the stoop? Was it about Brandon, or was it something else? Was this planned because she was defending her other friends too? Because as police are, following up on leads, they come across the altercation, like the issue that Whitney had with Stacy, and come to find out that there was a voicemail that Whitney had left on Stacy's machine the day of the party, and it wasn't very nice. So in Whitney's question, she admits, okay, well, yeah, I was mad about some petty drama, but I wasn't that serious about it. We were in a fight. This is about a boy. And although it felt like the end of the world and that I was so angry, I never would have wanted something like this to happen to her. The same kind of thought process also steered them in the direction of Abby, because she was the one who encouraged Stacy to go, was friends with Brandon, and had assured Stacy that Holly wasn't going to be there. And then now she was. So it was was this a trap that was set up? What's going on here? And based on her interview, it seemed like she truly only wanted Stacy to be at the party because she also wanted to go, just wanted her friend there, and even reiterated that I tried to even break up the fight. If this was a setup, I would have just turned a blind eye. The really frustrating thing about this case is, yes, looking back, seeing it on paper, you're well, it's obvious, but obvious and evidence don't equate to the same thing. We need the evidence to back it up. And even though everybody was pretty much on the same page, including the investigators, believing there was more to the story than falling on something sharp from the recycle bin, Stacy's case went cold for almost 20 years. It was Stacy's own cousin Jamie that kind of reinvigorated this case in March of 2019. She was just tired of waiting for justice to happen, and she called Detective Brian Martin and basically was listen, all of these years have passed. Somebody I think is going to say something. We have all of these key witnesses, mainly Brandon and Holly, who might say something that sounds different or might have second thoughts. After all these years that have passed, especially if something's not sitting right with you, it's probably something that is going to weigh on you forever. And it's almost you don't want to make that call yourself. But if somebody calls you, I think that's how Jamie was taking it, was maybe they just need the push to tell us a little bit more about what happened that night. I feel like somebody's got more to say. And she was right. So Detective Brian Martin, you might recognize him from the April Tinsley case that Susie also helped us cover. So he's the one who took the case file and re-interviewed all of the witnesses who had provided those initial statements all those years ago, including Brandon Muff. Allegedly, Brandon was still very upset and emotional talking about the case. He said that he felt terrible, that he felt like it was him that had affected this situation. He had a lot of regret over the fact that he had put, I guess, the girls in this situation, and that they were even fighting pretty much because of him. During this interview, there was a little bit more clarity, maybe just confirmation on the fact that yes, it was Brandon who, acknowledged that he had invited both Stacy and Holly to this party. And looking back, of some dumb situation of just inviting these girls who both liked him to this party. Now, over 30 years old, looking back, he's that was one of the worst decisions I've ever made, putting them in that situation. He was very firm on the fact that there was nothing set up. As far as he knew, this was not going to be I'm going to invite them both and Holly is going to take Stacy's life, but obviously knew this was going to end up in some form of dramatic situation. That being said, I think looking back at the interview that Brandon would have done initially and then coming back all of these years, yes, I think that regret stemmed from him knowing a lot more. So whether he had set anything up, which I truly don't believe, I do believe that this was something that had gotten completely out of hand, that he was expecting some form of drama. Also, though, I think the fact that he did not do the right thing right after was also eating at him. So from what I know, right after Stacy had died, he had called Holly and asked her what the happened. He had seen these injuries and is asking her what happened? Did you do this to her? And his story is that Holly admitted that she had a knife on her, but that it did not come out. So it was kind of listen, I did have a knife. I do still think it must have obviously been about the recycle bin. So don't say anything. And she also admitted to him that right after she went into his house, washed her hands, and then she took that knife and put it on this white car car that she had seen outside of the house and then had left it there. So then that was like, you know, like why it wasn't like near the scene when investigators had immediately gone there to interview people. The way I understand it, he's kind of still going with that narrative of being like, I truly thought that that's what happened. I thought that it was the recycle bin. Detective Martin has said, like, looking at the photos of Stacy's injuries, looking at the photos from the scene, like, yes, there was like a recycle bin that was topped over, but there was like, from what he could see, like there was no signs of like these like really sharp objects or broken glass that would have like done that to her. And I believe there was not even like blood around like the recycle bin in the photographs either. So off the hop, he's like, we're not even going to entertain the whole recycling thing. I just need to get to the bottom of like who knew what, when, where, what, why, how. Another reason why I think that Brandon was probably feeling a little bit of guilt after all of these years, like whether he knew after the fact or not that like Holly did have a knife, a lot of witnesses also informed the police that he was aware that Holly was upset and was planning on confronting Stacy if she was going. And when she found out that she was going to be there, allegedly she changed into sweats, put her hair into a ponytail, and made the statement, she's going to get a whipping tonight. The fact that there was going to be an altercation, everybody already knew that. Whether they knew how far, I again, not saying that I think that there was like some, you know, that she was lured or whatever, but there were several people that were very aware of the anger that Holly had towards Stacy that evening. Ultimately, Holly was re-interviewed. She was 33 at the time, and she had moved from Fort Wayne by this point and was living in, again, I'm probably going to butcher this because I want to be like Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, but maybe it's Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, where she was re-interviewed. And this time she admits to Detective Martin that she did usually carry a pocket knife with her. She said it was for protection, and once again claimed that she didn't have it during her fight with Stacy. So she said that she just like kept the knife in her purse. She wasn't carrying it when the fight happened, and insisted that even though she was angry and yes, it had led to them like physically fighting, it would have never gotten to the point of stabbing Stacy, because she said like, even though I was angry with her, I considered Stacy a friend. Her quote was, she was my friend. We were terrible teenage girls, but she was still my friend. I would not have done that to her intentionally. I never would have pulled a knife on her. Like, I had no intention of fighting her. I didn't know that she was going to be there. We were terrible bitches to each other, but she was still my friend. End quote. During that interview, Detective Martin just shoots for the stars, and he's like, well, do you still have that knife? And to his utter shock, she says, I might, gets up, goes to the back bedroom, and comes back with a pocket knife, and she gives it to him. He like almost like second like guesses, like her decision is like, I can take this. And she says, yeah, I'll even go get a Ziploc for you. So like goes, puts it in a Ziploc bag, like seal it. I mean, like obviously by this point there's like so many years that have passed for like DNA evidence, but the knife was swabbed for DNA, and it wasn't surprising that with the amount of time that had passed and it, like, you know, just like being out in the open and stuff like that, and I'm sure potentially like cleaned, Stacy's DNA was not found on the knife. However, a pathologist did confirm that the knife was consistent with the weapon suspected to have inflicted the 2 stab wounds to Stacy that resulted in her death. Once they got that information, it was kind of at that point, on top of witness statements, on top of the photos of seeing that everybody had kind of like ran and just believed this, not even believed, but like had no other choice but to go with this narrative of the recycle bin. Now with this, they were officially able to issue a warrant for Holly's arrest on Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. Allegedly, when they showed up to arrest her, she said something to like the effect of like, you know, like when they're like, do you know why we're here? She said like, I think I killed my best friend and that's why you're here. Again, very interesting, because it seems like she's the only person who tells this story and labels them as friends in any way. This case didn't end up going to trial. I believe that she was extradited to Fort Wayne, but on December 17th, 2021, she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and finally like had admitted to stabbing Stacy, saying that it was just like in like a heat of passion. And the plea that she took, I believe it's a 25-year sentence with 5 years suspended and 3 years of probation. So her earliest release date is March 28th, 2028, which is quite soon. This case made me so angry because it's like there's never, ever, ever, ever any excuse for this to happen. But there were so many elements of this case that I looked back and thought of like my adolescent years, you know, like my teen years, fights with my friends, you know, like hanging out with older boys, letting people like from different groups get, you know, in between your ears, and like how nasty teens can be to each other, especially girls. Like you don't like, even just looking at like my niece and nephew, I'm like, because they're like very close in age, I'm like, God, you guys are you guys are in like two different scenarios. I've only have girls, so I'm only used to like seeing this with the girl and also like experiencing for myself. I feel like not that long ago. I know I'm getting like super, super old, but didn't feel that long ago reflecting back on it. But to see both of them like similar age, you know, kind of going through like their own differences with their friends group, I'm like, the girls, like, goodness, you know, we definitely do have to have those conversations with our kids, with our loved ones, with our nieces, with our nephews, whoever. To hold more people, you know, like more of these like creepy older dudes that like hang around and, you know, like, oh, come to the house party, and just like kind of like reiterate to the girls, like, it feels like a compliment at that point, but it most definitely isn't. That's not okay. They're not okay. And just like, don't be creepy. Leave them alone. Because it's not their, you know, like it's not at that moment in time. Like you're just like, oh, I'm so mature. I'm super mature for my age. Like we all thought that, right? And then looking back, you're like, girl, no, you should have still been playing with your Polly Pockets, man. Maybe not at 16, but you know what I mean. I think I've mentioned this several times when we've talked about cases that are involved. Well, any case really. I think it's just like a blanket statement that my daughter has said to me like several times. My oldest daughters, I have 3 daughters. One of them is 19. And she has said to me like she really wasn't allowed to do sleepovers unless it was like someone I very, very, very much trusted. And even then I'm like trying to think of a situation. I'm like, I like family maybe. I really don't know. If there were sleepovers, they were at our house where I could like control the situation and like have eyes on them. And she'll go back of being like, I kind of liked that you had protected me, but also in the same sense, like you would really scare me, Mom. Like even if I was like going to dinner at people's houses, I'd be like leery of the adults or like older siblings. And I was like, I'm so sorry that like I instilled fear in you, but also kind of not. Like I do need you to be aware of your surroundings because, you know, like the second you let that guard down, you know, people are just like infiltrating that life. And it's these types of situations because it happens way too often. You've got these amazing kids. Stacy just had like her whole life ahead of her. She had even literally had such a good head on her shoulders that tried to distance herself from the situation and was like looking forward to her future. And when you've got like bad eggs around you, this situation is like completely out of your hand, even if you're trying to make the right decision. I think I'm I know I'm spiraling. I don't think I'm spiraling. I don't think I'm making sense. I'm trying to make sense and trying to justify why I've instilled so much fear in my children's lives. That's not funny, but kind of was like, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry at the same time. Like, it's just not worth it. It is not worth the situation. And looking back, I feel like that's like kind of like what we do in life, right? Especially as adults, for your kids, you're just like, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did, or the situations that I feel like so many of us watching right now could relate to this and be like, that could have easily been me or any of my friends, anybody like, you know, that I know and love, and was so unprovoked and undeserving. Like, this is ridiculous. Like the amount of like tension and friction and animosity and jealousy that sparks in people's lives. Like, I'm like, geez, Louise, man, we gotta do better. All right. Yeah, no, I'm definitely spiraling. I'm sending so much love to everybody that knew Stacy, especially you, Susie. Thank you so much for sharing Stacy's story. This story is just obviously very near and dear to my heart as well. I think like just of the similarities of like the groups of friends and the drama that you like can find yourself getting caught up in. And then now I feel like kind of like re-noticing that with, you know, like my nieces and nephews and my daughter who just graduated, and then my other ones who are gonna be at one point dealing with the mean girls. So cases like this are really hard to cover, break my heart because they're so preventable. But again, like just so important to remind all of us to just, you know, continue having those conversations. Maybe, I guess, like if it's traumatizing, like children are saying that I kind of traumatize them by having too much fear, maybe we have like a different way of saying that so they're not like uber scared, but like still like expressing the severity of the situation. I'll work on finding the happy medium there. Okay. If you guys have any suggestions, maybe, you know, leave it in the comment of how I can have that conversation, as opposed to being like, don't do this and don't go there because you will die. because I think that is usually like my delivery. So very fair. Anyways, thank you all for listening. I love you so much. This is it for me today. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.